is that I've admired you for a long time, and the artists you've painted with in Europe, just, to me, it was always extraordinary to see how far graffiti style writing would go, and how good it would get, and that what was quite wonderful is to see the development and the kind of authenticity you and your peers were bringing into the culture. And so I want to say I appreciate that. Even your new work inspires me, and I guess all of us a great deal, as you can see online. So I want to start with the early years. Frame this for us in terms of how you started and why you even started with your artistic career. Are we there? MADC, can you hear me? Okay, let me try getting her back on.
Sorry, this is...
Ah, there you are.
Yeah, it's like it's disconnecting us every time. Doesn't matter. So let's try. Yeah, so the early years, it's actually in my case, it was quite unusual because I didn't discover graffiti the way everybody else did, like seeing it in the streets. Because I was living in a very small village near the Czech border, and there was not really graffiti to see. So I actually discovered graffiti through a book that was called Graffiti Art Germany. And a friend of mine from school gave it to me. And I read it in one night, and I was completely fascinated by the culture and the background behind it, so that you could like be part of a whole move through your creativity. And you could choose your own name, you could choose your own identity, and that was really fascinating to me. So the next day, I went to a hardware store, bought my first two really bad cans, and started painting.
Was anybody else aware of this? Were your parents aware of this?
Not in the beginning, later, yes, especially when they get letters from from the judge. But in the beginning, no. It was just me running around with spray cans somewhere on garages and backyards. So.
And what was your motivation, though? What was, everyone has a motivation. They want to be famous, they want to fit
Yeah.
in.
For me, I mean, I always loved drawing and sketching, and it was kind of like an escape for me from reality. And I think that was the fascinating thing, you know, you could um, create your own identity through a style, through your creativity. And I think that was really the drive. There was nobody who could really see what I was doing, you know, so it was hardly fame at this time, you know.
So the general question that I'm sure you're always asked, well, how did you come up with the name Mad C? Did you start with Mad C first of all?
Now, now I started with Clyde, Bonnie and Clyde, but I never wanted to be Bonnie. I did never want to anybody to know that I was a girl. So then I was writing Skip. Then I was writing Scold, several other names. And at some point I came up with this Mad C thing because everybody said like I'm mad when I go painting. And I thought like, okay, I'm just gonna use this. And the C is for my first name, Claudia. So yeah.
And so as you start painting, tell me, frame this for us in terms of the environment, right? You're amongst boys mostly, I imagine.
Yeah.
And how was that for you trying to fit in and prove yourself amongst the boys?
Well, in the beginning, there were not that many boys, anyways, because there were only a few other writers. But I mean, in general, of course, you're kind of like an outsider. But since I
Yeah.
have been an outsider pretty much all my life, because I mean, I was born in the GDR, I grew up in Ethiopia, so I was a white kid in an African country, and people were rubbing my skin thinking I was dirty. So I was an outsider there. Then I came back to the GDR, where everybody thought I'm weird because I was growing up in Ethiopia. So then I'm like the wall came down, and then I was this kid from East Germany. So it's kind of like I grew into this role of being an outsider. So when I joined the graffiti movement, it was not new to me, you know. So I didn't expect to kind of like really fit in because that's not something I generally do. Um, But yeah, I mean, usually they just underestimate you and they don't really take you serious. I think that's the first thing that comes to mind. And for me, especially in the beginning, I was so surprised that spray cans are so hard to use. So everything I saw in these books was so amazing and advanced. And I could not understand how it was possible to do that kind of stuff with spray cans.
Yeah.
And it was really like also this image that you just show with like this machine style and everything. I did a lot of these things from the very beginning just because I wanted to try a lot of stuff to see what you can do, how far you can push a tool, basically. And I didn't want to be limited by the tool.
But you also painted trains, so you kept it between the walls and the trains, which I absolutely love.
Yeah.
What was it like the first time you went on a mission to write on a train?
It sucked bad time because I'm really small and I could only reach 10 centimeters of the train. And I understood that shit. I always have to bring something to stand on or have to sit on somebody's shoulders or I sometimes like carried a bucket around or had to climb the trains and hang from them. And so it was very hard to get the movement and the swing on trains, you know? So that's also why I never really developed that deep passion for trains, just because they are not really accessible to me, you know?
Yeah. But the walls, one of the things that I was always impressed with, that scale mattered a lot to you.
Yeah.
Now,
Also,
what's driving that? Is it the ego? Is it just the way you do your lettering, your style of lettering that demands
mhm.
that?
Well, like this piece that you just show now, I think that was especially inspired by Lumet because he had this movement of his letters that were really extreme at this time. Um, and I thought that was fascinating because it gave so much energy to the letters. So it was really
Yeah.
spreading out everywhere.
And with
Um,
Lumet was from what region of
he was from Munich. He's still in Munich. So he's in the from the south of Germany.
so
It's
he is an early, would you say, person who's been inspiring your development, your style?
Yeah, I mean, it took a long time until I really met him in person. But in the beginning, for the German writers, yes, because he was one of the first to use 3D styles and really had a different approach to using space, let's say. And another thing regarding scale was that in 2001, I joined the Bandits crew from Dresden,
Yeah.
and all these guys are really, really tall. And naturally, they also paint much bigger. So usually, when we painted a wall together, my pieces looked like shit in between them, you know, because they
Right.
were too small. It just didn't balance, you know. I didn't like the way it looked. Not that I really needed to compete with them because there was not competition. We were in a crew. But I basically had to stretch and find other ways to get movement into my letters. And even though the scale was not really made for my body or physical appearance. So step by step, I just started also painting bigger because of them, just to make the walls look better. So
Right.
yeah,
And tell us about this production because this is a very important in production in your coming up.
yeah. That's the 700 wall.
Yeah.
At some point in my graffiti career, I reached a point where I said, like, okay, I can actually paint pretty big and fast, and I wanted to see how far I can take this. And I had this wall that I got permission for because I saw it when I was riding on the train, so you can see it actually from the train tracks. And I saw this wall, and I was like, wow, okay, I gotta check and ask if I can get permission for this wall. So I got permission. And I just wanted to see how far I can really take it. Luckily, at this point, Molotov agreed to sponsor that because back then there was no way of affording paint or anything for
How
such
many cans would you say this production consumed?
1,560, I think it was. So that was quite a bit, plus a lot of bucket paint. And but the craziest thing about this wall is what I think nowadays nobody really realizes is that I painted it almost completely with a ladder. So I was going up and down the ladder about 500 times a day. Um, So, and I also, because the wall was a very strange format, so it's very long, um, about 6.5 meters or 7 meters high, and then very long. I decided to make it like a storyline, like a little bit of like telling my own story from starting with graffiti, basically on sketches, because that's what I did, along to, like producing pieces and pieces and pieces, kind of like fighting for your pieces to survive and to be seen also in the city, and how difficult it is. For one thing, because of the buff. For another thing, also other writers who go over your work, and so on and so forth. So all the difficulties you run into as a graffiti writer, and up to the point where you have painted so much that you did make your name in the game. So it's kind of like, it was also like a storyline for me. At that time, I also had studied character animation at St. Martin's in London. So it was like a sum up of my studies and of like my graffiti life, like I kind of tried to bring it together. And the interesting point about this was I finished it, I think, on 2nd of November in 2010, after 4 months of working on this. And I realized that I could actually even paint bigger. So I thought like, okay, this is not my limit.
This is a great point because look at the slide, right? I wanted to emphasize how small you are comparatively to your painting. It's extraordinary. It's wildly ambitious.
Yeah, and nowadays it's funny, like the walls get bigger and bigger and bigger, and every time I'm scared of the size, I'm scared of the height, but I try to do it anyways because I want to push my limits.
Right. And it's not just, one of the things I noticed in your murals is that you also were, again, going back to the character animation and the photorealism, you had tremendous skill to and diversity, right? That made you stand out.
Yeah. For me, it was the key for me was always that the tool does not rule me, but I rule the tool, so that I can basically paint and draw and do whatever I like and not be limited by it. And then I can decide who I am and what I want to show.
Yeah.
I think it's something a lot of artists face, no matter if it's a graffiti artist or regular artist, painting with oil colors or whatever. If you do something the first time, you realize how hard it is, and step by step, it gets easier and easier, and then you don't have to think about it anymore, that about the tools that you use. And I think that was my main goal, and also to like figure out textures, how to paint fire, how to paint the skin of a dinosaur, whatever. I was just curious also if you can um, paint something like this with a spray can. And once I could, I was basically free, and I
Yeah,
could.
and I guess that what that frees you up for is something that keeps coming through these early works is that you're also a storyteller,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
and we're looking at the Bandits mural, and that's really interesting, right? To kind of just move away from just focusing on the letter, but focusing on the letters and telling a bigger story around it,
yeah.
right? You see that in this piece, and then this one's quite interesting too, with the Mad C in the middle with the soldier. Is that a soldier on the no on the left? Is
Yeah.
it my left? Yeah.
Yeah, this is a piece I added this in the slides because I thought it was quite interesting because it also showed that I try to explore a little bit of 3D styles also. I mean, everybody who's into 3D letters knows Dime from Hamburg in Germany. So he was also an influence in the beginning. I was just fascinated also by how he's using shades and light
Mhm.
and transports that feeling of three-dimensional graffiti. And I think he had a lot of influence, especially also on writers in the UK, I think. Um, and yeah, so that was also something I explored again, just because I was curious, what you can do.
Right. But then you come back to kind of a traditional style.
Yeah.
And so with this slide, I wanted to ask you about New York's influence on you. Was there any influence on you? And if so, what was it?
Yeah. New York influence, the first one that comes to my mind is Scene. What I liked about Scene's work was always that, first of all, his letters, they had so much movement and funk, even though they were legible. And on the other side, he also used characters and backgrounds. So he already had this concept of not just writing a name, but even adding more to it. I think that was definitely fascinating. I watched Beat Street, Style Wars, all these movies. But I think New York, there was not like too many artists in particular. I think it was more this feeling um, of that's where graffiti came from, you know, to me. And also, I remember the first time I came to New York, it was, um, yeah, it's an amazing feeling. You know, you really felt connected to this whole movement and to, well, basically this way of styling your signature. I mean, that's
Yeah.
basically it, you know. And you can really feel the energy of the city in those letters, and that's what fascinated me so much. That you come to the city and everything makes sense, like why this happened and how it looks.
What's really interesting is because the New York style writers are so hardcore. They're so judgmental. There's
Yeah,
just you know the drill, right?
yeah,
Just like the b-boys and the rappers, right?
yeah,
There aren't as diplomatic as they may be in Europe about it,
yeah,
right? They'll call you to your face and say, "Hey, you're whack, you're a toy." So you come here and you have to kind of prove yourself,
yeah,
and that was really kind of an important journey to have. I think I would imagine
hmm
many people say that, right, about coming to Mecca. Let's just say.
yeah,
Um, so New York's influencing you. I want to talk to you just not too heavily, but an
hmm
important person in your life that was also a great influence, and again, one of my favorite writers from Europe as well, Siggy Dare, right? And I'm a huge fan of his work and works you guys did together. Uh,
yeah,
Tell us a little bit about that friendship and that partnership.
yeah. There has always been like in Europe, he has been my main influence next to Sweat and Cantu. Um, just because the way he connected his letters, the flow in his pieces was completely my aesthetic, basically. Um, and I didn't know him in person for a while. I remember watching him at a graffiti jam once, and I was so shy I was not able to talk to him. I just watched him paint. And then when I started researching for my book Street Fonts, in 2005, six, I just reached out to him and I said, like, here, listen, I'm writing this book and would you be interested in participating? And he got back to me with a very long email. Yeah, I saw your work. It's amazing. Let's meet up. Let's paint something. I was like, whoa, okay. So I went to Basel to meet him. And we were really soulmates when it came to style. We became really good friends pretty fast. He was a very approachable person in general. He was very open, very easygoing, very diplomatic. And the piece that she just showed on the top was actually one of the first ones we ever painted together. I think it might, yeah, I think it was actually the first one. So that's at the line in Basel in one of the tunnels. So he showed me how to get in there and how to paint. And it was one of the best moments in my life, graffiti life, when I was painting next to him. I was so proud and happy that we could, paint together. Yeah, and so over the years we painted more and more often. He had, of course, a big influence on my style, but it was really we became friends on yeah, same eye level, let's say. And also, what he taught me was to kind of open up your mind to the art world, because I think he was a big pioneer, not just for style writing, but he was a curator for the Carhartt Gallery
Yeah.
in Main. And the Carhartt Gallery was one of the first really big galleries who did serious shows and with a collector behind who also bought pieces from the artist. And at that time when we met, he was already able to make a living just out of art for quite a while. And that was pretty impressive. So he was one of the first artists in Europe who made a living of basically of style writing, because he was always writing his name. And that was very impressive. So he also helped me with the first steps into the art world, basically.
Yep. And I would also push you to change the way you were painting, right? And
Yeah,
because there was a radical shift in your painting
yeah,
and your ideas of painting right after that, that
yeah,
period. And
yeah.
this type of work that you started pushing was quite
hmm
fascinating because for me in the beginning when I started seeing this, it it became very interesting in terms of academic theories about color,
Hmm.
and you know, but also incorporating, of course, graffiti style writing, but moving away into color theory. Well,
Hmm.
tell me about how you were entering into this new space of color, form, and color.
Yeah. For me, at some point, like after about 10, 15, uh, 10, 15 years, I felt like I've explored everything there is to explore within the graffiti world, you know, like photorealism, 3D, style writing, throw ups, everything. And I felt like, okay, this is a point now where I cannot learn anymore from this movement. I have to think outside of the box. Because if you stay inside of the box, you always are going to hit a wall. So I had to get out of it. And the way to get out of it was for me to, in the beginning, to change tools. So I used brushes and watercolor, which is the most unlikely thing you would connect graffiti with. Um, and I used the colors I would usually use for the fill-ins in my pieces, but then use them with watercolors and with brushes and see how it goes, like where it takes me. I would use the movement of the letters and how I connect them, but without actually using the outlines. So step by step, I came up with this mix of colors that happened also by chance. And then I used what I did in the studio and on paper or on canvas, and then I took it out on the street again. And then the movement from the streets, again, I brought back into the studio. And then step by step, this kind of style developed. And it was really fascinating because at some point, I felt really liberated. I finally felt like, okay, this is me, you know? It's very unexpected. It's not what I would have thought I would be going to do like 10, 15 years ago. Um, but that was really like the expression of who I am and what I do, like break it down. It's like, for example, if I take your b-boy characters, right? You have all the movements in there, and like the essence of what this is in a few lines. It's really fascinating how you do this. And basically, that's also what I do in a different way. So I use the colors I would use to fill in my pieces and the backgrounds. I use the movement of my pieces. I use the connections, how I would connect the letter with another, but I break it down into something that is basically the essence, you know?
What fascinates me about the work, and this is allow me to get a little bit academia
Mm-hmm.
on you, because there's an artist that I long admired and studied was Hans Hoffman, and he always
Mm-hmm.
talked about the push and pull of colors,
Mm-hmm.
and that's something that happens within your work, right? And the emotive qualities of color, and that's something that's been explored, you know, by great theorists over time. But the idea of pushing and pulling colors in space is one thing, right? The other thing is the movement of color, right? The velocity of color. And
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the things that fascinates me about your work, which kind of falls in line with some of the futurist concepts, but in a very different way, because these are, again, it's almost like not pushing just color, it's pushing light, right? It's pushing medium water, let's just say.
Absolutely.
And these, it sounds to me that these were kind of unintentional, right? This wasn't coming from the academic space, let's just say. This was experimental.
Yeah. Purely like when I start working on a canvas, I never have a concept. I don't know what I'm gonna do. It's like it really comes from a different dimension. Like it's really me, you know. It's something that I don't plan. So I start with one layer, I let it dry, and then I add another layer, and then something happens, you know. That also things happen by chance, and I think again, in the end, it has to do with graffiti writing because if you take an outline and you paint a piece, you can paint it in a million different color schemes. And some of them will ruin your piece, and some of them will actually highlight your piece or make it even better. And that's what happens in my canvases too. Sometimes you suddenly have this feeling of depth and light, and there's a totally different dimension in it. And sometimes I also ruin them, and I'm like, okay, this didn't work out, but who cares? Just like let's do another one and explore further. And it's interesting where this can take you. And it's
Well,
also this kind of feeling for combination of colors was not consciously, you know, it's a subconscious thing that basically surfaced step by step.
are these work? I mean, because again, when I mentioned velocity. Do you paint that fast in the studio, or is there more deliberate
No,
process?
no, it's impossible because I use a lot of water. So I paint a layer, and very often it has to dry for half a day or even a full day until it's dry. Because also the way the paint flows and everything, I want to leave this to chance and then see where it goes. So usually I work on 5 to 10 pieces at the same time, because otherwise I would have to wait for a whole day until
Yeah.
I can continue with a piece. So I
So
always work on multiple pieces.
I want to talk about this transition now that you're developing this style, you're bringing it to market, you want to share it with a lot of people, and
Mm,
you're entering the galleries.
yeah.
Um, this transition is oftentimes not a very easy one for any artist, let alone a woman. How did you find it at first? Was it an easy entry for you? Was it something that you were aspiring to at a certain point?
Mm. Um, I think in my case, I was lucky because it was pretty slow and step by step. So I started with like graffiti shows, you know, like painting your name on some sneakers or whatever. So the first experiences were with very simple stuff. Let's say not really serious stuff. When I was 16, I had some first solo shows with portraits. Then I was pretty excited about it. But when it became more and more serious, it was a stretch, I think, but it was not really the exhibitions, because for me it was nice. Also, I see this more like a challenge and like a new playground, you know. Um, I think every new opportunity is a new playground and something that can basically widen your imagination and add something. But what was more interesting to me and a much bigger challenge was actually meeting the people who come to your shows and who buy your work. That was really new to me, you know, because I never felt like my work was for sale. And that was a big stretch. I remember it was the same stretch when I first came public with my real name and I gave interviews. That was very weird. Kind of like being, yeah, the official person, let's say.
Yeah, being unmasked.
Exactly. And it feels a little bit like this with your creative soul when you suddenly sell your work. You know, it's you really have to overcome this step and let go of it. It's like letting go of a wall. Like when you're finished, you take your picture and you go. And it's a bit similar to the canvases, you know. And for me, that was quite weird to get in contact with collectors. Now I really love it because you know, you can see the joy in their eyes and also what they see in it and what gives it to them. Like when they tell me like they have it in their hallway and when they pass it, they feel better. You know, because basically that's what I like people, you know, to do when they see my work. I want to transport something positive. You know,
Yeah, and
so that's
what I like about that again, that goes back to those concepts of color theory, right? And
yeah,
you have an innate ability to understand the power of color
yeah.
and how that transforms not just space but people's energies, people's moods.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
I like that, and it's funny because I came up on a picture. Oh, you sent this picture, and I have to share this. Talk about changing mood with color. Boom.
Yes.
What a fantastic project. How
Yeah.
fitting for that environment. Tell us about this project.
Yeah. So that was definitely the best spot ever. So I was invited to paint the resort on the Maldives, Pullman. Actually, I got stuck there only 3 weeks ago for the second part of painting this island. Um, so I came there the first time end of last year to paint this. This is the overwater bar. And for me, I mean, for a lot of people, it seems weird that you paint a luxury hotel in the Maldives. But on the other hand, I'm still a writer and I always look for the best spots, and I definitely got the best spot there, you know? So when I got this offer, I was inspired by the surrounding, basically. I mean, it was the third time I went to the Maldives. So I went there before, and it's very fascinating to be there because on these islands, the light is very specific. I thought about it, it's probably what the Impressionists or the first Expressionists said about the south of France, because that's where they were working, because the light was amazing. And because of the light, also the colors were amazing. So when you go to the Maldives, everything is crystal clear, you know, like all colors are completely bright and lush. So the green is extremely green, the blue is extremely blue. It's very unique. So, and I wanted to catch this whole feeling of being there, also being in the ocean, and adding to this, you know, instead of taking something away. Yeah.
As well, you know, the water, right?
Yeah.
Your work is based on water, so it's very befitting in terms of your process. I was really taken by that. I was like, oh, I almost want to make a pilgrimage there and check it out myself. So I want to go back to, because you travel the world a lot, and that's the beauty of what graffiti has given us, right? It's opened up the world. It's created a network. I often tell people that, you know, graffiti it's our passport, right? It's our artistic passport into worlds we probably would have never
Yeah.
gotten into before. And this recently, you showed in China.
Yeah.
How was that reception for you? That must have been pretty amazing.
China was unbelievable. I have been to China before only once. And it's quite different because, I mean, you don't understand the language, you don't speak it. There's no way of basically getting around without, you know, somebody helping you. It is quite a different culture, but in a way also a lot of parallels to kind of like my, let's say, belief system. So the way they it's difficult to say, like the history of China. I learned a lot about this. That was really fascinating, like how welcoming they are, how kind with each other, and so on. And when I came and had the show, the people behind the gallery were really amazing and welcoming, and the reception of the show was incredible. Like I came there, the show was packed. I had sold like 29 paintings already before I came there. It was crazy. And people were so appreciative. And I think one reason for that is that a lot of, like, China, of course, they are a big nation. There's so many people living there, so there is a certain amount of control, and it's necessary. But also that limits the freedom of people, and also the freedom of art. So there are not too many artists yet who are really like internationally known to us, especially also not in graffiti. Um, and I could really see that the people's, like, what they saw in my work was the freedom, and also the emotions that are missing in a country that has so many people, and that have to be controlled to a certain amount of to a certain amount. Yeah, so they really appreciated this from a totally different point of view, and it was really new to me to see. And they were unbelievably emotional. So some were like standing in front of my walls with tears in their eyes, and
Extraordinary.
that was very moving, actually. Yeah.
Beautiful. So one of the things we spoke earlier about, and one of the things that I guess has to be underscored about you is your work ethic, right? Both your process and work ethic, and it's something I
Yeah.
want to explore with you really quick.
Yeah. I
Um,
think Hex is on this thing. He knows.
yeah,
He has
I
to get up at 5 in the morning when he's working with me.
so I like I said, I want to switch gears to that because it's so fascinating and how thorough you are, how thoughtful you are, the process. And I'm going to play this video in the background so you can people get an idea of it. But you know, you're unrelenting. Why? Why? Explain to us why scale is of no issue to you.
Scale is an issue. I'm always scared of heights. Like when I was painting this that you just showed me, I was so scared. I was like, literally, I was shaking. But I want to push my limits. I mean, that's life, you know. If you always do the same things, you don't feel alive anymore at some point. Everything is the same, and you have to push your limits. And with graffiti, it's an amazing way, you know, like there are walls that get bigger and bigger, heights that are higher and higher, and I just love that. And for me, it's also like because you say work ethic, I want to get shit done, and I want to get it done as quick as I can because if I finish it quick, then I can do another thing. That's basically the idea behind it. It's not that I want to challenge myself how fast I can do something. I did that, yes, just out of interest, but it really is because there's so many interesting projects, so many things to do. I have a book with ideas that will last me 10 years. And I just want to do as much as I can because I enjoy it. And that's why when I do these big projects, I plan them very precisely. So um, I have a exact sketch, this is the exact scales, a grid. I have written in the sketch, I have written all the colors for all the sections so that I don't waste time figuring out which color I have to use now. Um, and it just speeds the whole process up immensely, you know. And that's why I start working on such a wall at 6 in the morning and I paint until sundown. So very often I paint like 12-hour days. And yeah, I feel like shit the next morning. But yeah, so I get like 1,000 square meters done in like 12, 13 days. And then I can move on to the next thing.
Well, that's fantastic you say that because I thought you were a lot more fearless. I
I like also with this one, oof, I was so scared. I have to check the engines 10 times. I have to, you know, talk to the people who install the lifts to make sure, okay, this is really
yeah.
safe. In this case, also, to be honest, I mean, the engines were German made, so I was actually pretty happy because I know in Germany everything is being checked like a million times. And in the end, with walls like this, you don't have to trust anything but the machines anymore, you know, and
Right.
the people who installed it. Because I mean, this wall was 56 meters high in Abu Dhabi, and you cannot leave anything to
Yeah.
chance at these
Well,
heights anymore.
in this sequence that I'm going to go through, and we're going to have to push it a little bit. This kind of speed dating we're doing right now is that my fascination with this is that it's the conquest of architecture,
Yeah,
and how graffiti and muralism has had imposed itself on architecture in a way that has never been done before.
yeah.
And you have such a great command of that. And of course you could see these images, your paintings rather, for miles.
Yeah.
Uh, Talk to me about the relationship of painting a building, the physicality of it, not just the surface, so to speak, but the architectural structure.
Yeah. For me, like when I see, like when I get proposals for murals, the first thing I do is check all the photo material I get, but also like the Google Maps link, get a feeling for the surrounding, like the one you showed before in Berlin. It's very dreary, actually, especially in wintertime. You only see gray. So I said like, okay, this is really needs some green, some positivity, some nature, basically the feeling of nature, because that's not there because it's only blocks. So usually I try to add something that I feel is missing or that could add to it. Um, and then also like the way I approach a project like this is that I actually paint an original canvas, and then the original canvas I paint in big scale
Yeah.
on this mural. Um, and when you're actually painting it, it's beautiful. I remember I painted a mural in Dortmund in Germany, and it was bricks. And in the bricks, there were names carved from the people who actually made the bricks 150 years ago. And then you add this layer of paint on top of this. Or if you paint a building that's historical or next to an historical spot, it has something magical because you add a new dimension of life to it that wasn't there before. Or you turn the building that was basically meaningless or just served a purpose, and you turn this into something that's very emotional. So I think that's very powerful.
I think so. And you know, in this particular image, what I liked is the antiquity that's in the foreground,
Yeah,
the figure right here,
yeah,
juxtaposed by this modern painting on this building. And what is what is it like for you when you're painting and the curiosity of the community, and then the response afterwards? Because of
yeah,
course you're painting sometimes on people's building. People live in these spaces, right?
yeah. Um, so in general, people are very appreciative and positive. A lot of them, they come to you and they say, "Thank you so much. Finally, I look not just at a wall, but at something I enjoy." They really appreciate it, especially if they watch you work on this for days. They appreciate it a lot more because they understand how much hard work it is also. But of course, you also sometimes have people who say like, "Oh, this is too bright, and what is this? And it is so much in your face, and it's too much for me." So of course, you also have people who don't like it. That's natural. I mean, that's the whole thing about art. But in general, what I think is beautiful is that it really engages with the community and people. You know, they meet on the street, they discuss the work, and what happens to the community is really beautiful. So, or like because we just had this mural in Abu Dhabi, there were two extremes. So on the seventh floor, there was a lady who was always yelling. She was always unhappy about everything. And then on the 14th floor, there was a lady who was cooking for us, catering for us, and handing us food and drinks out of the window into the lift. So basically, that was amazing because that were all the extremes, you know.
Yeah, but you found a remedy for this on one project, the Berlin Lights Festival, right? So
Yeah.
you don't have to worry about it, right? And I want to share this
No.
with people because, again, this is kind of what you know. I'm a technology person. I love technology and art. I think we have to utilize it as best we can. And so here's what's interesting. You paint this beautiful painting, and then that painting is projected on this
Yeah.
building, the turn of the century building.
Yeah. That was the Festival of Lights in Berlin, and it's an historical building. It's a hotel, the Hotel de Rome. And that was very interesting for me too, because also my work is not just, you know, like I incorporate water. So water is a big factor, but also light. So I try to catch light in my colors and give this feeling of depth, so that you feel like you move into it. So light is definitely something that's very important. I also use different materials with crystals, for example, that are all about light. Sometimes I also use metallic colors that change appearance depending on where you stand in front of the painting to see
Right.
how light changes actually the piece. So this festival was fantastic because, of course, also it changes the appearance of the original canvas, but everything around it is dark, and then suddenly you have this amazing composition, you know, like
Right.
of
And you and you
dark
and
and
you have
light.
this fascination with architecture
Mhm.
and I'm impressed that you love putting your name on buildings and things like that. And this one is just absolutely amazing. I have to say this is quite a feat.
Yes,
To-
that's the graffiti mind. Put your name on everything.
So we've got a few minutes left, so we're gonna have to push through a little quicker, okay? So I want to share with people. It's like we could spend hours talking to you, but it's important to keynote some things in about you because also you're an educator, you're a publisher, right? You're trying to
Hmm.
share this experience with people. You've published several books, the
Hmm.
mural book, the sticker book,
Hmm.
and one of my favorite, the street font book.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the street font book.
Okay. Yeah. For me, I was always fascinated by calligraphy and how basically about letters in general. Like if you take a class of 30 pupils, everybody will have a different hand style and how much it can express. I think it's amazing. And that's basically what we do in graffiti. We find our own hand style and transport that. But what I was always a bit annoyed about was that people, like the general public, doesn't appreciate it because they just say like, oh, okay, it's just scribbles because they don't understand it. They cannot read it. So I thought like, okay, if I give them the whole alphabet of one style, they can finally see the what a vast variety there is, you know, because it's like giving somebody the key, like Rosetta Stone, you know, finally giving them the key to be able to read something. So that was
Yes.
my intention behind this book, you know, to get more appreciation for this art form, basically. And it was amazing because when I came out with this book, it was exactly that, you know, like also what the reviews said and the regular press or people who had nothing to do with graffiti before, who said they were walking through the street differently now. They could really start to read the letters and understand the movements of the pieces. And that's what I really loved about it. Yeah.
Fantastic. So we're gonna end there in the last 10 minutes, but this part of it is really important because we're gonna try to take some questions, but I want 2 minutes to ask you this
Mm-hmm.
because um, we're in the age of Corona, right?
Yes.
And a lot of us artists are wondering and questioning, you know, what's before us, right?
Yes.
You are a very public person. You're engaged in the world. You touch people. You paint with people. You have assistants. How is all this affecting your work?
I think the biggest effect is that I cannot move anymore. So it kind of like limits my freedom of exploring the world and doing like massive projects that I was had scheduled all around the globe. So I have to stay here. But I usually don't do in summer because that's the time when I paint my murals. So I have to stay in the studio. But actually, I take this from a positive point of view because now I have time to explore some new ideas, and that's I think what everybody will do. And it also proves some of my theories because I was asked in the last, it was really like also this image that you just show with like this machine, see what you can do, how far you can push a tool basically. And I didn't want to be limited by the tool.
But you also painted trains, so you kept it between the walls and the trains, which I absolutely love.
Yeah.
What was it like the first time you went on a mission to ride on a train?
It sucked bad time because I'm really small and I could only reach 10 centimeters of the train. And I understood that shit. I always have to bring something to stand on or have to sit on somebody's shoulders or I sometimes like carried a bucket around or had to climb the trains and hang from them. And so it was very hard to get the movement and the swing on trains, you know? So that's also why I never really developed that deep passion for trains, just because they are not really accessible to me, you know?
Yeah. But the walls, one of the things that I was always impressed with, that scale mattered a lot to you.
Yeah.
Now,
Also,
what's driving that? Is it the ego? Is it just the way you do your lettering, your style of lettering that demands
mhm.
that?
Well, like this piece that you just show now, I think that was especially inspired by Lumet because he had this movement of his letters that were really extreme at this time. Um, and I thought that was fascinating because it gave so much energy to the letters. So it was really
Yeah.
spreading out everywhere.
And with Lumet,
Um,
Lumet was from what region of
he was from Munich. He's still in Munich. So he's in the from the south of Germany.
so
It,
so he is an early, would you say, person who's been inspiring your development, your style?
yeah, I mean, it took a long time until I really met him in person. But in the beginning, for the German writers, yes, because he was one of the first to use 3D styles and really had a different approach to using space, let's say. And another thing regarding scale was that in 2001, I joined the Bandits crew from Dresden.
Yeah.
And all these guys are really, really tall. And naturally, they also paint much bigger. So usually when we painted the wall together, my pieces looked like shit in between them, you know, because they
Right.
were too small. It just didn't balance, you know. I didn't like the way it looked. Not that I really needed to compete with them because there was not competition. We were in a crew. But I basically had to stretch and find other ways to get movement into my letters. And even though the scale was not really made for my body or physical appearance. So step by step, I just started also painting bigger because of them, just to make the walls look better.
Right.
So
And tell us about this production because this is a very important in production in your coming up.
yeah, that's the 700 wall.
Yeah.
At some point in my graffiti career, I reached a point where I said, like, okay, I can actually paint pretty big and fast, and I wanted to see how far I can take this. And I had this wall that I got permission for because I saw it when I was riding on the train, so you can see it actually from the train tracks. And I saw this wall, and I was like, wow, okay, I gotta check and ask if I can get permission for this wall. So I got permission. And I just wanted to see how far I can really take it. Luckily, at this point, Molotov agreed to sponsor that because back then there was no way of affording paint or anything for
How
such
many cans would you say this production consumed?
1,560, I think it was. So that was quite a bit, plus a lot of bucket paint. And but the craziest thing about this wall is what I think nowadays nobody really realizes is that I painted it almost completely with a ladder. So I was going up and down the ladder about 500 times a day. Um, so, and I also, because the wall was a very strange format, so it's very long, um, about 6.5 meters or 7 meters high, and then very long. I decided to make it like a storyline, like a little bit of like telling my own story from starting with graffiti, basically on sketches because that's what I did, along to like producing pieces and pieces and pieces, kind of like fighting for your pieces to survive and to be seen also in the city, and how difficult it is. For one thing, because of the buff. For another thing, also other writers who go over your work and so on and so forth. So all the difficulties you run into as a graffiti writer, and up to the point where you have painted so much that you did make your name in the game. So it's kind of like it was also like a storyline for me. At that time, I also had studied character animation at St. Martin's in London. So it was like a sum up of my studies and of like my graffiti life. Like I kind of tried to bring it together. And the interesting point about this was I finished it, I think, on 2nd of November in 2010, after 4 months of working on this. And I realized that I could actually even paint bigger. So I thought like, okay, this is not my limit. Um,
This is a great point because look at the slide, right? I wanted to emphasize how small you are comparatively to your painting. It's extraordinary. It's wildly ambitious.
yeah. And nowadays it's funny, like the walls get bigger and bigger and bigger. And every time I'm scared of the size, I'm scared of the height, but I try to do it anyways because I want to push my limits, you know?
Right. And it's not just, one of the things I noticed in your murals is that you also were, again, going back to the character animation and the photorealism, you had tremendous skill to and diversity, right?
Yeah.
That made you stand out.
Yeah. For me, it was the key for me was always that the tool does not rule me, but I rule the tool, so that I can basically paint and draw and do whatever I like, and not be limited by it, and then I can decide who I am and what I want to show. You know,
Yeah.
I think it's something a lot of artists face, no matter if it's a graffiti artist or regular artist, painting with oil colors or whatever. If you do something the first time, you realize how hard it is, and step by step, it gets easier and easier, and then you don't have to think about it anymore, that about the tools that you use. And I think that was my main goal, you know, and also to like figure out textures, how to paint fire, how to paint the skin of a dinosaur, whatever. I was just curious also if you can um, paint something like this with a spray can. And once I could, I was basically free, you know, and I
Yeah,
could,
and I guess that what that frees you up for is something that keeps coming through these early works is that you're also a storyteller,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
we're looking at the Bandits mural, and you know that's really interesting, right? To kind of just move away from just focusing on the letter, but focusing on the letters and telling a bigger story around it,
yeah.
right? You see that in this piece, and then this one's quite interesting too, with the Mad C in the middle with the soldier. Is that a soldier on the no on the left? Is
Yeah.
it my left? Yeah.
Yeah, this is a piece I added this in the slides because I thought it was quite interesting because it also showed that I try to explore a little bit of 3D styles also. I mean, everybody who's into 3D letters knows style.